I would like to welcome and thank everybody for joining this webinar. We have a full house today planned, at least. We have over 500 registered attendees or participants from 59 countries and all in all covering 5 continents. Education has continuously been evolving, no doubt, but the events over the past 2 years have shown that nothing is as constant as change itself. Education has to go new ways fast, had to go new ways fast, and this without warning. This development had inspired us, Pino Network and WorldEDAC, to hold the series of webinars under the title Schools Without Walls. And today's session is about its implications on VET and TVET. The purpose and goal of this webinar isn't to provide you with one final solution to whatever issues you may have when educating in this field. On the contrary, we would like to help spark new ideas and enable a dialogue to identify potential solutions and, of course, challenges as well. We envision that every participant leaves this webinar with new perspectives, ideas, and energy when it comes to tackling this new challenge of educating online. We have 2 keynote speeches to set the stage. The first one will be held by Dr. Borin Chakroun, Director of the Division for Policies and Lifelong Learning Systems at UNESCO. Welcome.
Thank you, Danny, and welcome to you and to all colleagues joining this conference.
Thank you. And he will provide an insight from UNESCO's global perspective with regard to the current state and potential development of digitalization. The next keynote we will have will be from Albert Znengyu. Thank you so much. It's such a tongue breaker for me. I'm sorry. Executive Secretary of the Association for Development of Education in Africa, ADIA. Welcome.
Welcome. Very pleasure, Danny, to join this important event. Thank you.
Thank you. And he will provide an African perspective regarding the current challenges in TVET education. Before starting with the first keynote, I would like to just put forward some housekeeping. We have 2 polls. One will be started right now. It would be helpful if you would provide us a reply so that we can improve our offering in the future. This pop-up should be on your screen, dear attendees. The second thing is the chat is actually disabled, but the Q&A part, if you look at the bottom of your screen, when you move the mouse, if it's blank, you should be able to see Q&A. This is enabled so that you are able to put forward your questions at any time. We will do our best to answer these live during the webinar within with our panelists. Should that not be possible, we will be posting all questions which we can into our website and post the answers accordingly to it. So keep an eye on our webpage after all. The links for WorldEDAC and Pino Network can be seen at the end of the session. We will put up a PowerPoint picture where you can find out our home pages and find us on social media accordingly. This is the first of a series of webinars which we have planned on the topic of schools without walls. If you would like to be kept informed, please do follow us on social media or sign up for our newsletters. So now I would like to hand over the word to Dr. Borin Chakroun and wish you all an inspiring webinar. Over to you, Borin.
Thank you, Danny, and I'm very pleased to be here today and to share our perspective regarding the issues of open education and open learning. I think the thematic focus that you have selected for this first webinar is excellent. It is timely. It has an important implications for the work that we are all doing, and the impact on TVET is in particular important aspect. I have organized my presentation around a few moments and a few aspects, and I will try to keep with the time that was allocated to me. But I think that we should contextualize a bit the discussion regarding the topic that you have selected. And I would like first to start with a bit showing what is the situation today. In reality, we are not out of the crisis. We still today, and these are data, up-to-date data regarding the school closure all over the world, we still have more than 54 million learners affected by the crisis, around 11 countries who are closed because of the COVID crisis. And while, of course, this number is not as important as it was in the peak of the COVID crisis or in the different waves, but still, I think we have to be concerned with the, I would say, persistent and protracted crisis that we are living and that education and training system are living. So it's very important to keep in mind that the disruption is still there. When we looked at the what's the response to the school closure and how technical and vocational education and training, starting with education system and looking specifically on TVET, we found that in most countries there was an approach toward leveraging different technologies, and not only high-tech technologies, meaning online platforms, and what is usually accepted as the norm for online learning. For remote learning. So I think it's very important to keep in mind that there is a mix of technologies, and including in the most in advanced economies, as you can see, there is a mix of technologies that have been used, while when we go to low income countries, it's even more towards no tech, or at least low tech. But we also found that most member states consider that online learning and technology will be part of the education system, and will change the way the education system will be delivered and organized. And around 91% are using and will incorporate it into the learning this year. So it's a trend that we have to acknowledge, with a caveat about the digital divide and the widening gap, particularly across countries, but also within countries, as we know. When we look together with our colleagues at ILO and the World Bank on the disruption to TVET programs due to COVID, we found that around 90% of countries at that time and at the peak closed completely TVET centers. That 98% who responded indicated disruption of the work-based learning, and that around 80% responded that they have reported the certification and exams, which of course impacts the learning process, but also the transition from school to work. We also found that the COVID has impacted regarding the use of technology and the aspect related to remote learning. Before the COVID, around 13% of the 92 countries that responded to the survey indicated that they had some form of regularly using online distance learning. But with the crisis, around 46 out of the 92 were indicating that they are using online learning. So there is a COVID effect in terms of the leveraging of the technology, in terms of investing in new directions for leveraging technology for technical and vocational education and training. But when we looked at the income levels and how different countries have responded, as you can see from this chart, we see differences across economies. While in high-income economies, the migration to fully remote has been rather at the largest extent, around 70%. This is not the case in low income. It's less than 20. With a mix then in terms of the partial remote and the different the mix of technologies, as I mentioned earlier. So I think we have to be concerned regarding the gap between high and low income countries, but also within countries as well. What we have understood also is that TVET institutions were reactive to the crisis and have seized this opportunity. The crisis is also an opportunity to innovate, and some of them have reported that they have allocated additional resources committed to remote learning. Some have engaged in public and private partnership, and some have created and developed new programs to respond to some of the shortages in the labor market. So while there is a crisis, there is also innovation and creativity and new development that we have to acknowledge and we have to valorize, we have to capitalize upon. I would like to pick up 4 impacts that are important for our discussion today. First of all, we have seen and we have evidence of significant learning losses with significant inequalities. And this something that the response in TVET, the remote learning strategies will have to address. That this is impacting lifelong learning opportunities with many young people in particular, but also adults are lacking the right skills. They have a gap in foundation skills, and this will impact their further learning. It has also an economic dimension with an estimate that we have done together with the World Bank and UNICEF of around $17 trillion loss in future earning of current learners. And this is about their revenues. This is about their career development in the labor market. Last piece, which is very important, is about the well-being and the impact of the crisis on the well-being. So it's very important that we take into account these aspects and these impacts when we are thinking about how we can leverage remote learning, how this will be impacting technical and vocational education and training. But we have also to take into account that we are in disrupted the global economy. Yesterday, IMF published a new forecast regarding the global recovery, and the news are not good, particularly for low and middle income countries where there is a less, I would say, expectation in terms of the economic growth. We also know from our ILO colleagues' data is that the unemployment rate is still very high, and the unemployment, the number of unemployed people is still much higher than the pre-COVID situation. That is different across different economies. And when we look at the OECD countries, we see that the situation is better in terms of the unemployment rates. So this unequal, I would say, recovery and unequal impact, we'll have to be very careful about it. Maybe just few words, and I know because you mentioned that we have to be within the time. I think when we are speaking about the remote learning, we have to keep an eye very closely to the digital technology and the digital divide and how we will fill this divide. And from our perspective, there are a few directions that we have to take, and I would like to mention some of them. Let me move to these aspects, given the time. So first of all, we think that we have to take into account these interconnected challenges of climate change and response to it, and the green economy, but also the digital transformation aspect, and how TVET system will have to respond to these twin challenges, and how, in that case, remote learning will contribute to to addressing these twin challenges. But more broadly, we think that there is a need for a new social contract for education and training, and this is coming from 2 pieces of work that both ILO and UNESCO have worked on. ILO colleagues worked on the future of work, and UNESCO published last year in November the future of learning and the futures of education dimension. And they have common denominators. We think that the social contract has to be human-centered, that it has to offer lifelong learning for all, that it has to be contributing to sustainable economies and sustainable societies. And in that case, from the future of learning perspective, there are 5 dimensions that are important here: pedagogy, curricula, teaching, schools, and learning in all areas of life, which is something that is related to what we are discussing today, and how we can connect different learning spaces, how we can think schools without walls, and that's about openness of those schools. So probably if we would like to take this journey of schools without walls, I think we need to start the journey with some conceptual perspective. First of all, probably we'll have to refresh and redefine the concept of learning spaces. What are the learning spaces we are speaking about? We have to think about formal, non-formal, and formal learning. We have to rethink accreditation, recognition, and validation of learning. Understanding better learning ecosystem. Probably you have to map these learning spaces, school, workplace, virtual life experience, and others. Identifying the form of integration between extracurricular activities, potentially adjustment of curricula, content, and the way we are able to include the environment of study in this context. Probably defining the drivers in the learning spaces, institutions, individuals, other stakeholders that are important. And this is impacting new forms of and modalities of assessment and certification, and this will be addressed by my fellow speakers who will come later on. From a policy perspective, the Schools Without Walls journey have to look at what are the implications in terms of regulation, legislation, the funding scheme that we have to think about, teachers' role, and potentially look at the governance dimension, how the collaboration among different case stakeholders can happen. What are the quality assurance mechanisms that we have to put in place? How we can center on equity and inclusion in this case, and ensure that no one is left behind. How we articulate technology, and how we can support implications in terms of integration of learning management system, education management information system, labor market management information system. So this integration of the different information system is important. But beyond that is about the effectiveness of the public policy implementation. What are the success factors that we are looking at? What is success in this case? How we address the challenges? How we can evaluate and monitor the and what data we need for this case? So these are some aspects that they are not solution. They are more a perspective how we can take forward. But there are two aspects that I would like to finish with that seems to me important for our discussion. One is how we can place TVET within a lifelong learning perspective. And this is something that I hope we'll be covering in the discussion today. We know that, for example, when even we take advanced economies like in EU, the participation in adult learning is very low, particularly for low qualified persons. And in many cases, vocational training is addressing some of those needs. So how we can motivate people for learning and engaging in what they can consider as worth in investment, technical and vocational education and training. We think that there are two tools that could be used and we see them emerging. The first one is entitlement to lifelong learning. And to give just an example, we can look at the example of Singapore about the skills future and looking at how to inform individuals about learning opportunities, how to integrate high quality system of education and training to respond to the needs, how we can ensure that employers recognize and value those skills acquired, but how we create a culture of lifelong learning where vocational training is a cornerstone. So this is an example of strategy that have been adopted that pave the way for what we are speaking about today. The other one is about how we can recognize and value different set of skills, and micro-credentials have been one of the instruments that have been covered. And we are suggesting a definition because we see that there are different definitions, different understanding. Maybe just to finish, and sorry for being long, Danny, I would like to say that first of all, there are two elements that are important. How we can ensure and support people, particularly the most disadvantaged, in engaging in vocational education and training and leveraging schools without walls. But also how we focus on companies, in particular small and medium type enterprises. But also how we can shape a culture of lifelong learning that can bring multi-stakeholder partnership, that can look at the whole of government approach, and that is at different levels of the system, including at the local level. These are the points that I wanted to mention, and I hope this can help address some of the challenges that we will be discussing today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Borin. I must say it's quite inspiring to see what information you have available, and for me, one thing came out of your speech, your presentation, and that's clearly nobody should be left behind when it comes to education. And in one way or another, everybody should have the opportunity to get education. And even though VET or technical vocational education may not have the status in certain countries of being a highly respectable way of life in the German-speaking countries, to be honest. My experience is that they have actually started taking over because the practitioners are what are needed on the market. And if we look at it correctly, they're actually the backbone of every economy. So really inspiring, and thank you so much. Okay. So thank you for that. I would like to now hand over to Albert, perhaps to provide us a short insight with regard to the African perspective.
Thank you, Danny, for giving me the opportunity to participate in this important webinar discussing on the school without walls, particularly the implication on what you call, we commonly call TVET. And in our context, we are mostly using the vocabulary TVSD, Technical Vocational Skill Development. And this is so important because I was actually listening carefully the presentation by Boran about TVET and the needs to create more inclusiveness, which I think is so important. And that's why we believe that one of the things we need to consider as we look at the school without walls is how do we make delivery of vocational training more flexible and inclusive. And that's why we use the word TVSD. And there's going to be a need to rethink quality assurance because it's so important. But also we believe that if we look at the investment required in TVSD or TVET, whatever how we can define it, it is critical that we consider that TVET is an opportunity to raise the social inclusions in most of our African countries. So education in general and skill development, vocational skill development in particular, in the current context is being affected by various external factors that require decision makers and stakeholders to rethink and redesign new approaches to improve the delivery of training, bearing in mind, of course, the issues of access, as we discuss now. By access, we look at the equity, the gender equity, inclusion. And inclusion is so important in the context of Africa. I was attending this morning another webinar where we discussed the aspect of inclusion for TVET in particular. Because we all know that most of the communities live really in the poor settings where access to education and training in particular is so low. So how do we make sure that we consider inclusion as one of the key aspects, particularly as far as technical and vocational education is concerned? We also tackle the issue of quality. Again, as Boran mentioned, there are different aspects to look at when it comes to quality, from curriculum perspective to training of trainers, but also to the quality of the curriculum itself in terms of making sure that we have the input from the private sector to make it therefore relevant. So while in the current context of the COVID-19 pandemic, education system or training system have tried to use various tools to support the continuity of education and learning during school closure. Technical vocational skill development has suffered the most due to its nature of delivery that focuses mainly on hands-on training. And this is a reality that we have seen in many places. Delivering TVET through remote means have been very difficult. Some countries have come up with different solutions in supporting remote learning, but it is still at a very low scale. So there's the need really to come up with innovative solutions that could actually be designed and piloted in terms of delivering technical vocational remotely. However, it appears that the challenge remains in scaling up those solutions, as they are mostly relying on digital technology that are not available in many places, especially in hard-to-reach areas. It is therefore critical, as we invest in innovative solutions to address access and quality and relevance, to make sure that we do it in a systemic way. And this is where policymakers play a key important role. Because unless the policymakers understand the importance of integrating technology into it, and they are able to support training institutions and at the all levels, it's going to be very difficult actually to be able to integrate this digital technology. We may acknowledge the fact that not all TVET trades can be delivered remotely due to the specific requirements, as the quality and relevance may seriously suffer. So this is also another important aspect that we need to consider in this discussion. Of course, I cannot really underscore the role of industry. It's really paramount to facilitate the acquisition of technology tools and expertise to support quality and relevant TVET delivery, with a special focus on allowing acquisition of relevant practical skills remotely. We all acknowledge, with the limited resources in many countries, students are not really getting exposed to practical skills, and therefore the issue of quality and relevance is really very high. So how do we make sure that we create that opportunity for engaging with the private sector? I think Boren was really referring to one of the important practices that we are seeing evolving, which is known as workplace learning. So private sector need to open up their doors to allow the student to conduct practices. We have seen this happening in some of the advanced countries. I think it's possible also to initiate, particularly in some of these sectors that are growing in Africa, including particularly construction, hospitality, agribusiness, mining, and others, where there are potential opportunities to actually allow students to practice and therefore be able to get practical experiences indeed. Of course, we know in many of African countries, private sector is still made of informal sector. So how do we support informal sector so that they can reach a certain level of engaging with training institutions, with the hope that once the skills acquired are actually tangible, can really supportive in the informal sector to move into a formal sector? I think this is also another angle we need to consider in this perspective. So the important really strengthening of public-private partnership to facilitate acquisition is so important, and this is something that we need to consider in this discussion. Let me just share a few undertakings as far as the day is concerned. One of the things that we're doing right now, in terms of promoting remote learning using technology, we have initiated a pilot of what we call remote education benchmarking toolkits. This is really a series of norms and standards to guide countries as they embark in remote learning. As I said before, we have seen challenges and issues that countries face in addressing remote learning during the COVID-19. And one of the issues was the fact that there were no policy ni strategies in place, and therefore having standards that can guide remote learning. So we really embarked in supporting countries to adopt norms and standards in applying remote technology. We are right now piloting this remote education benchmarking tool in 10 countries in Africa. We have set a set of norms and standards for higher education. Specifically, we have others for technical vocational. We also have others for basic education, and we have actually selected countries accordingly. The second undertaking that we are about to launch is actually to conduct a situation analysis of ICT in education in 30 African countries. Again, most countries are looking to make investment in ICT, particularly for education. And this actually look at the infrastructure, both the hard and soft, capacity, applications, and of course, the actual teaching and learning. So it is really important as countries embark in this investment, to be able to advise and support this undertaking accordingly. So this is an important study that we'll be conducting. The other thing that we are also doing as a DARE through our platform is actually to look into the implication of digitalization and the fourth industrial revolution on technical vocational skill development. Particularly, the question is, how can we reform technical vocational skill development delivery in light of digitalization and the fourth industrial revolution? We've already conducted a study. We also had a high-level policy dialogue in this perspective. Now, there are a number of recommendations that we are pushing forward to make sure that can actually inform the required reform that we want to see at the country level. We are also moving into the critical issue of data, because I think what this is really very important. We have seen most of the vocational training that are delivered in most countries are no longer up to date. They are not connected with the demand in the labor market. So how do we make them demand-driven? We are embarking now into supporting countries in terms of having education skill quality data system in supporting actually addressing the mismatch between the demand and supply. And this is going to be an important tool that will guide decisions at the country level. Last but not least, we are also partnering with different organizations that are really supporting vocational training in Africa. I can name, of course, the World Bank, World Edact, UNESCO, the GIZ, and even private sector, because we believe we can only achieve this as a continent by creating opportunity for partnership, and so that we can measure the impact, and also creating a peer learning mechanism among countries as we see ourselves as opening up borders for countries to be able to collaborate and be able to exchange the knowledge and the skill. So in brief, this is what I wanted to share, and I hope that the discussion will go actually to shape a rethinking of TVET without words. How do we expand access and therefore, in the same time, build the required quality tools in this regard? So thank you so much again for giving me this opportunity. And back to you, Danny. Thank you.
Thank you also very much, Albert. My takeaway from your words is clearly we have to rethink and redesign training to ensure the access and inclusion accordingly, amongst other things, of course. There are loads of challenges. Of course, this is also financially dependent because funding has to be there, but also technology and willingness of the different target groups and the different roles to be able to implement it. Thank you for throwing that in, and I believe that the panelists will be touching on different topics. So thank you for your time as well. Okay, I would like to now dive into the panel discussion. And for this, I would like to start first by asking Julie from oh, by the way, yes, please, panelists, please keep your videos on at all time now, because I believe it's great if the people are able to get to know you better, and this way we don't always have to switch on, switch off of the videos. So Julie, from a teacher's pedagogy point of view, what implications does digital have on infrastructure?
Well, good morning or good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you today. And definitely, infrastructure takes on a whole new meaning when it comes to a school without walls and online learning. Previously, as educators, we know that infrastructure was all about the physical buildings, the classrooms, the laboratories, all of the equipment that we need to teach in technical programs. But again, certainly during COVID, when many of our facilities were closed, as we heard from the first speaker, that infrastructure didn't do us much good relative to educating students. So infrastructure takes on a whole new meaning. We must focus now more on the IT infrastructure. And again, that is certainly no easy task. Going back to the first speaker, there are many inequities around the world, even in the US. There are many inequities in access in urban versus rural areas, all of that type of thing. But it is very important to focus on that IT infrastructure to make sure that you have that reliable network, to make sure that certainly all of the faculty and the learners can have access to the internet if we're using online technologies, and that all of the end users have the hardware, the software that they need. Cybersecurity, IT security, definitely part of that infrastructure. At one point during the pandemic, the college I was working at basically had a cyber attack, a large network outage. It just added to the stress of the instructional situation. And certainly all of us from an instructional standpoint are concerned about the security relative to the assessment and testing of our learners. Again, this is no easy task for all of us in education to build this infrastructure that goes, well beyond our facilities, into the homes of our faculty, into the homes of our students. And again, as the first speaker mentioned, it really does take partnership. Partnership between the schools, the institutions, partnerships with government to help support these efforts. And the U.S. Government has been very generous in supporting building the IT infrastructure for remote learning during the pandemic. And certainly private sector companies, as mentioned, have a role to play in this partnership as well. So again, those are my thoughts on building infrastructure in a very new way. And I will turn it over to my colleague Ali to add his comments.
Thank you very much. I think I can talk from 3 European projects where we did a huge research among VET providers, both initial VET and continuous VET in Europe. Our finding was that actually the major challenge to digitalization and online education and a school without walls is not the technical, because the technical they manage, because there is so much technical resources available free of charge on internet. The major challenge which we found were the readiness of the teachers in VET, how the teachers in VET can adapt themselves to a new reality. One major challenge was curation, how the teachers adopt their training material to online education and not using the same material as they do face-to-face. This is one of the challenges. Another challenge which we also noticed was the teacher doesn't have any kind of quality monitoring of what they are doing to measure or to assess the learning outcomes when it is online education, because it's totally different assessment system in online education than in a physical face-to-face education. So I think the major challenge, institutional challenge, structural challenge are the teachers. So the teachers need really upskilling when it comes to online education, comparing to face-to-face education. That we see as a major challenge. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Ali. And Julie, of course. This brings me to a question which I also think should be further brought forward. I mean, some of the questions in the Q&A area, I'm trying to read them and listen to the panelists at the same time. But from the gist of certain questions, I can see that this also has implications regarding technology. And for this, perhaps I would call upon Annie. What would you say are the possible implications regarding technology? Annie?
Good afternoon from Northern Finland, from Oulu.
Hello, yes.
Hello. Can you repeat your question?
What are possible implications regarding technology?
Yes, indeed. Different and new methods must be had and used in teaching, of course, in order to teach and learn practical work skills For example, videos, virtual work platforms, and AI can be useful way to learn. I think so.
Okay, thank you. Perhaps from an employer's point of view, Torsten, would you have any further comments with regard to the implications on technology?
Yes, indeed, because thank you, Dani, first of all. We also apply teaching in our facilities, at least here in Germany. We have training centers. We participate in the dual schools here. And so we also have lived all the situation from 2020 onwards. So for us, it was a mixture of everything. First of all, you need internet that is working, that it's not only not always there, even in Germany, especially when you have whole families that are working from home at the same time. So this is the first challenge, having the internet working, having the computers available. Of course, in Germany there has been a quite good approach on that, also by the federal government. But in other countries, as Mr. Chacrun said, the situation is much different. I can talk about my experience of Peru, for example, because I'm also Peruvian. So this is one side of the medal. The other side is related more to what Mr. Rashidi already talked about, the teaching as it is. Since we are an industrial company, our teachers are, let's say, very, very related to hands-on training. So they don't know much methods nor technologies regarding the virtualization. So we have the possibilities, of course, as being a big German and global company, we can afford to buy everything they need. But the second step is to have those teachers performing like we would like. So we, in our academy, because I'm part of a department that is related specifically to teaching, not only students but also people that are already working, we have trainers, technical trainers that are top, that are very experienced guys, but they still teach with how do you say, folien, with slides. Yeah, so they don't even use PowerPoint. So how can you adapt this training methods to this new environment? This is the main focus we should have.
I think you brought a lot of points, or a lot of things to the point. Also, a question in the Q&A was with regard to how can it be, how can we do digital training if the infrastructure isn't even there? So I fully agree. This is definitely one of the challenges. Perhaps we'll be able to discuss later on and identify whether there's any kind of solution for something like that, or workarounds, or but perhaps if I could ask Samuel, what would you say would be, covering the student's perspective of this? I mean, is technology available all the time, or is it easy to use, or is it intuitive, or what is your take on this?
Yes, good morning, good afternoon to all of our participants. I would like to say that take this from two perspectives. That is the availability of the technology, and then its accessibility to all kinds of learners. I would want to indicate that, for instance, with the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, where I work, the All Africa Student Union, we did a couple of situation room meetings with the national student unions across the African region. And one of the feedbacks that we got was as to whether people actually have the enabling technologies for them to be able to access the online learning, which I think that it wasn't the case for almost every student. So for instance, if you come to Ghana, for instance, if you come to Accra, if you go to the major cities, then you'd realize that it's much easier for students living in these areas to have access to some of the enabling technology, because even if they do not own it themselves, then possibly they could, go to their friends and all of that to be able to access such tech, to be able to participate in online learning. But in the case of students or children who are living in very marginalized communities, then this becomes a challenge for them. So I think that one, we should start considering as to how we can make TVET learning or TVET pedagogy more practical for when it comes to teaching it online. Because I mean, as we may know it, even in joining lectures online, which sometimes is more theoretical, it's even difficult to follow. Now, thinking of TVETs, for example, how to maybe learn carpentry or maybe learn how to perhaps even anything concerning engineering, right? It may not seem so practical, especially if the student does not have the tools or the necessary equipment at home to be able to practice it in person. So how do we, reimagine some of these approaches, and how do we ensure that the kind of learning teaching approach that would be employed in ensuring that learners are also, we are able to achieve the kind of outcomes that we want to achieve with e-TVETs, if I may put it that way. Sorry, I think you are still on mute.
I never want to fall into your words, so I mute myself and then I forget to unmute. Thank you so much for those words. And I think it does bring down another point showing that it's not a matter of wanting to, it's a matter of having the resources available and to put the opportunity to access accordingly. I think there's still a lot to learn and to do in that respect. I think that also brings another point for me, which is more along the line of quality. If we look at the quality aspect, how can we ensure what the learner is learning is relevant, practical, and up to the industry's requirement? And perhaps I thank you for your words, Samuel, but perhaps I'll throw this question to Vitaly and get his point of view.
Hello, dear friends. Thank you for inviting me to this webinar. I like to speak not about the implication of pandemic conditions and pandemic circumstances on TVET, but because the pandemic sometimes will end, but digitalization is with us forever, I guess. And as we speak about quality, in quality management, we know exactly that each process should have verification after its completion. But it is a simple process, and our education, other processes, they are, we can refer to them as special processes. They need validation from practice, from practical work. That's why I think that the single solution, absolutely sure in this, we must combine our digitalization with practical work. So we need work-based learning. We should incorporate any model, any method that will decrease the gap between our institution, VET institution, and employers. And we need to produce our graduates as a ready oven, as it is told. So we need to develop a different model of work-based learning. And this is the single, to my mind, the single decision, solution to be sure that our quality of our training is good. And perhaps it will be the best. So this is my understanding of the question of quality, only with employers.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. Okay. Ali, you've also had a lot of experience with regard to quality assurance with regard to the European Union. What would your take be on this?
Yeah, this has been a challenge for European Union during the last 11 years or 12, since they created the European Common Framework Approach to Quality, ECAVET. I can say like this, that this is the eternal question. How do we validate the learning outcomes is according to the requirement in a specific occupation? And for that, during the last 12 years, I and my colleagues, we have been working on how can we develop a system, because the main issue is that whatever the VET providers are doing, the employers are not satisfied with the result. So how can we reach a common approach between VET provider and the employers, so we can judge the student learning outcomes according to the same language, same standards. And this is what the European Union has been trying to develop, a loop where the required learning outcomes are based on the knowledge and skill required by a specific occupation per task they are performing in the occupation. So when the employers and the VET provider together define those knowledge and skill, then it's very easy, because after the termination of the education, or 6 months or 1 year after education, the employers can measure the skill of the people according to those definition of skill and knowledge per occupational task, which was defined in the beginning. Now we are in front of new challenges, because green economy, sustainable economy, digitalization, Industry 4.0, they require that we define new skills and new knowledge. And this is something which we have to do, but the system is there. So, I mean, we don't need to reinvent the system. What we have to do is to define the new skills and knowledge and say what learning outcomes should be achieved, so it can be measured when they enter enterprises and perform in the occupation.
Wise, and think definitely something to follow through with. I have another question regarding remote learning having implications on institution. I just, you know, I still believe that I have to mute Albert briefly. There we go. Sorry about that.
Danny, can I have a few words? Annie
Yes,
here.
Annie, of course.
Thank you.
Feel free.
I think Ali and Vitality say very important things, and during COVID-19 lockdown, we know that lockdown led to a shift to distance learning, and the fact is that on the job learning and competence demonstrations closed it down. And it was very difficult for some students, and it is pity that some students didn't have any opportunity to graduate during the first and even second corona wave. And after noticing together this with workplaces, we noticed that how we can work by new way to finding solutions. Teachers' guiding and support was meaningful, and deeply cooperation in workplaces too, and many students have graduated now and have new job. But one more point, because about quality assurance, Finnish VET model is like quality system, and quality of VET is one part of the knowledge-based management, and our quality assurance consists of quality management system of education providers, national steering and regulation, and of course external evaluation. But of course we have to develop quality assurance by having continuous improvement towards excellence together, and then we can have students what they need. I think so.
Okay, Thank you for that input as well. Would anyone else from the panel like to perhaps say something to this? Or, I mean, quality is really one of the most important things in education, not quantity, it's quality. Of course, we want the quantity of people to join, but we want the quality of those going out, that everybody can profit, of course. Okay, so perhaps the next question to you again, just quickly, Julie. Do you think remote learning has also implications on, I mean, we talked about infrastructure. How's about institutions themselves? I mean, implications are everywhere, that's clear, but what are they from your perspective? Just to get a discussion started here, maybe.
Certainly, and remote learning clearly has implications for the entire institution. Thinking back to how we recruit students, are we going to be recruiting students into, you know, the traditional instructional settings, or recruiting them into an online setting? And certainly with the pandemic, we had many students inquiring, are classes going to be back to face-to-face, or are my classes going to be online? Students want to know what type of instruction they will be receiving. As far as the instruction itself, I think we've heard from all of our speakers today that relative to pedagogy, instructors are going to have many choices, many options. We don't want all of their choices to be driven by accessible and available technology, but that certainly is the reality of the situation. Still, they will have choices whether to deliver instruction synchronously, asynchronously, in a hybrid type of a model. But I think at the end of the day, back to your point, the emphasis is going to have to be on quality. And regardless of how we are delivering the instruction, are the students mastering the competencies that are needed for the workplace? Because we know that is the number one concern of employers. But, you know, beyond instruction, it also has tremendous implications for those who work in schools. If all of the students are remote, does that mean that now the faculty, the staff, the administration can also be working remotely? And is that something that was done because it was a necessity during COVID, or is it going to be more of the way of the future, just because it is a preference? The same with our student services. We need to rethink what student services look like in a school without walls. We need to look at student life and co-curricular activities and student development and all of those aspects of a complete education. And what does that look like in a traditional institution versus the school without walls? And I think, going back to an earlier point, I think the temptation is to try to replicate everything that we've been doing for so many years relative to instruction, student services, student life, administrative services, just to replicate those in the virtual world. But that's not always easy, as we've talked about. It has many complications. And I think we would like to look beyond COVID, and is there a way to deliver instruction, all of those related services, in a way involving technology, involving some hybrid options, that we can actually make things better and improve the overall educational experience for our students. And I will turn it over to Vitaly to add some additional comments.
Yeah, thank you. In this area, we have a real competition now with non-formal and formal learning. And you told us, right, that we need new curricula. We should rearrange this curricula and student service. We should be more attractive for our students, because many students leave during their education, leave our colleges for half a year, for a year, and then they come back. And so the second niche of our to be more attractive, not only in the courses, in their layout, in our curriculum, but in validation of non-formal and formal learning. This is our very significant and very important tool for attracting students to our TVET education, because a lot of people choose different ways of learning. They learn everywhere, at workplace, at home now during our COVID-19 pandemic. So different ways of getting this education, their education. And I think that developing good, attractive, again, the main word attractive, good, attractive procedures of validation of non-formal learning and awarding micro-credentials for our potential student or for our previous student who left already our colleges and universities, and then they come back to ask, can we get some award? We complete this course. We saw on the YouTube very good movies. We try to do this work. Can I collect this all knowledge and skills and to get some micro credential? This is the very often of I meet this question very often in my work at the university and with colleges. So I think that this remote learning, from one side, it is very helpful because we can we can send our student, our potential student, to pass the test, to pass exams for recognition of his learning, non-formal and formal learning. And from the other side, it makes attractive other learning, not within my college. So this is the great challenge for us, to make our education and to move it to another level of attractiveness. Thank you.
Thank you for that as well, Vitaly. So I understood it also from Julie's point of view. Copy paste of standard everyday procedures is not possible to just call it digitalization. That we also have to keep an eye on methodologies. Your point of bringing across, if I understood correctly, having micro-credentials could be of value, of course, for the pathway of young students, and also for their motivations. And I do hope perhaps Samuel will be able to say the one or other thing to this. But before we go to another question, which I have, I would like to touch briefly. I mean, I love the questions we got. We have 22 open points, or they're not all questions, but I would like to pull out one which I just saw, which I don't quite understand. I would not underline it as such. It says, I understand TVET is a computer-based type of learning, and therefore it should be more on the actual and repetitive execution of the skills required. The challenge now is how to do this in distance learning. If I may, I would just like to my personal opinion bring that forward. I do not agree that vocational education training or technical vocational training is repetitive. On the contrary, it should be how to cope with problems which have not been there before, based on learning of problems which have been perhaps the norm. And for this, maybe someone in the panel would like to correct me, my point of view. Anyone from the panel? Samuel, do you have a perspective on this? Or Torsten?
Yes, I also do agree with saying that I don't think that, I mean, the kind of skills that you are able to acquire from a TVET training is supposed to be repetitive. Because in the first place, for instance, if you have to, per how I understand it, right? If you acquire a skill like maybe fixing cars, right? And daily, every car has its own, peculiar problems, and that you are required to proffer a solution to that problem, which can perhaps be replicated and even be made better in other contexts. So I grew up in a very small area called Abosokai in Accra. And you realize that most of the young men there, or women, have acquired some skill through apprenticeship. and also some through formalized TVET education. And you realize that these young men and women are always innovating. They are always trying to, for instance, even cars that have been made in Europe, they are able to find ways that locally they can create other versions of car parts that they can help make even other cars that they haven't even produced before or perhaps worked on before to make them work. So I think that TVET is, for me, a very crucial aspect of any economy that can, through that, we can create other businesses, we can bring solutions to real life problems, and also perhaps lead to poverty alleviation, among others.
Thank you for that comment. Yeah, Torsten, I saw you have your hand raised as well, please.
Exactly. Yeah, well, actually, nothing is repetitive, as well as non-presentation, even if it has the same slides, is repetitive, because every time you do it, you make it, or you try to make it better. And that's the same way what we as an industry think about TVET. And something I would like to point out also is the importance of the cooperation of the industry with the educational institutions. So we do it very, very strong here in Germany because we are part, as I said, of the dual education system, but also in other countries. Since this is a cycle, if we don't collaborate with institutions, we don't get the people we need, the qualified people. So if we continue with that, we will achieve this circle of quality and of continuous improvement in our TVETs all over the world. And this will, of course, be also an effect on our workforce. Of course, the last years have been tough. I'm not saying that the quality maybe has been the same, but we are struggling. We are trying to make it, to keep a quality level that permits us to hire young people who are really capable of doing the business. Of course, maybe we need to help them a little bit more once they enter the company. But we haven't seen a very, let's say, strong dismemberment of the learning quality of the people.
Thank you for that perspective as well. I've just been corrected with my interpretation of CBT. I interpreted it to be computer-based training. It was meant competency-based training. My apologies for that misunderstanding, and we shall readdress that question on the webpage in a later point in time. So thank you again. Perhaps one last question before we start to move towards a wrap-up. Samuel, I still would like to know your opinion with regard to students and learners' comfortability with regard to digital tools. I mean, the one hand is the availability. I understand that. Is it available? But how would you underline the intuitivity of hardware, software, learning, teaching, online? What are your experiences?
Yeah, so I would want to admit that, I mean, for young people, I think that we have grown into the digital age. And I think for most of us, students and young people, we have grown to, I mean, initially work with digital tools and all of that. So I would believe that it comes easily when we are trying to use our tools, even though in my experience, for instance, in my master's class, there were a couple of challenges that the student union on campus had to help some other students who weren't so comfortable with using the Zoom platform and all of that, and other digital tools when it came to us shifting to the online mode of learning. However, I think that I would want to also share Another thought, I think that I saw a similar one in the chat where there was an indication that, for instance, data costs in Africa are quite expensive as maybe compared to the other regions. And so you will find that perhaps not every student would find it easy to, buy a certain amount of data to stay maybe throughout a 3-hour lecture, right? Because on a normal basis, if you're on campus physically, then you are likely to sit in a lecture for about 1 to 3 hours. But I mean, if you check how the data cost would be, perhaps it may be impossible to stay through a 3-hour lecture with the amount of data that a student might have. So in some instances, you see that students are dropping off a class and all of that, or perhaps their networks are not so stable to stay throughout a lecture, which makes it sometimes difficult for students to focus throughout a lecture. And sometimes students have to do, most of the reading or trying to make meaning out of a topic on their own. So for instance, what the All Africa Student Union has been doing is since December last year, we have been running a campaign, which we call a digital inclusion campaign, which is largely supposed to engage member unions, give them advocacy skills, try to put them advocacy skills to be able to engage telecommunication companies and then also policymakers in their country to try to, where such enabling technologies are unavailable, to try to make them available to learners in those communities, and where we believe that it's possible that we could, subsidize the cost of data in such communities, we are able to do them to ensure that, learners are not, overburdened when it comes to learning online. And also, sorry, Danny, just one last bit. I think that another aspect of, online learning is, being able to also learn from other students. Because, for example, in a TVET class, for instance, as I would imagine it, and I haven't been in a TVET classroom before, but as I would imagine it, if you're in a TVET class, perhaps you're learning how to bake a cake, right? You are able to also learn that from your colleague students. But then in an online setting, how are we able to also ensure saying that other students are able to learn from colleague students, which sometimes I think that it's because students, I think, find it more easy to learn from their colleague students sometimes. Yeah, so in an online setting, how are we also able to ensure saying, perhaps in rethinking the approaches to TVET, perhaps that can also be a consideration. Thank you.
Very good point. Absolutely. I see that Annie has her hand raised. Perhaps she would like to add something to this.
Yes, thank you very much. I think one point is very important also to students and teachers during COVID-19. I think we have to take care of well-being, of course, well-being in learning communities, because we need all support for how we study, how we teach, and how we live during in variable situations. And cooperation is basis for well-being. I think so.
True. Thank you for that point as well. We have now 15 minutes left to go. I would like to ask the panel whether anybody would like to add something before we hand over to Anne Viher-Kari to provide us with a wrap-up and a summary so that everybody can take away home the one or other. One thing I do promise everybody in the all attendees, we are not going to just ignore what has been posted. We have to go through that and take time. Just replying on the fly is quite difficult. At least I'm not multitasking capable. I cannot read and think at the same time. Read, talk, and think at the same time. But we'll definitely go after that. So question to the panelists. Does anybody have a question? Anyone have no further comment? I have Ali. Please feel free.
I just wanted to add something because I'm participating in 5 European projects regarding challenges of digitalization in vocational education. And after passing the research phase of those projects, one conclusion I've been thinking about from all this research is that digitalization would have come anyway, whether COVID came or not, it's independently. But to be honest to you, I see what kind of possibilities and opportunities it will open for the future. The only thing COVID did was to make everything much faster and underpin the development. But it will give us enormous opportunity, and it's up to us to take this opportunity and to develop vocational education, especially with regards to quality, so we can measure always the outcome. Because without measuring the outcome, it's no use. It's just empty talk.
Thank you for that, Ali, and I fully agree. I think the pandemic was just there to get us out of our comfort zone. Otherwise, it would have taken so much longer until we're in that world. It was moving in that direction anyway. But I think that jolt was definitely an important aspect. And suppliers of education solution, etc., they are also constantly trying to identify where problems are. And I think events such as this help them to help you or help the learner or those who have to pass on to the learner. So I am really happy that we had such a great panel here. To all the attendees and anyone who will be watching this video once it is over, once the webinar is over, we have a web page on World EDAC Association, where we will then be making the video available of this webinar so that anyone who missed it will be able to listen again. Or if somebody would like to see the presentation again, we will also be inserting the presentation up there. Just keep an eye on that. Perhaps I would like to now hand over to Anne for a wrap up, and I will from now on say thank you for everything to everybody, and I will shut up as of now. Dear Anne.
Thank you, Danny. Dear ladies and gentlemen, I'm very delighted to be here this evening, and it's an honor to be summarizing the discussions and insights of this event. There were very many very important issues raised, so I'll try my best to summarize all that. I'd first like to mention that I'm representing here the PINO network, as already said, and it's a cooperation network of education organizations and companies involved in education here in Oulu region in the northern Finland. And my home organization is the University of Oulu. And as PINO network members, we have a shared interest in international networking and cooperating with international partners. And cooperation is something we all need. We all need that in order to cope, in order to adapt to sudden changes, in order to improve, and in order to succeed. So cooperation is very essential. And this is not, of course, a novel realization, but always very timely, I think, and expectedly it emerged also here today. Well, for instance, as witnessed here, we have cooperated with the excellent World EDAC team, aiming to reach all of you to discuss how digitalization of education is affecting TVET. The goal of this webinar was to spark ideas and to inspire. I'm sure that most of you are familiar with the old saying about half a glass of water. Even though these are really tough times, we can say, I think I can proudly state that we here think that our glass is definitely half full, where some think it might be half empty, we think it's half full. In his, excuse me, I have my notes, so I'm running too fast. In his keynote, Handling the Implications, Dr. Shakrun from UNESCO presented statistics, how the pandemic has affected differently different regions and how it has deepened the learning crisis even further. So the crisis was there already, but the pandemic has had very many implications, and also for the whole societies. I mean, and there are many implications to learning, but also to employment and therefore the whole societies. He also raised the importance of TVET and the accessibility issues to TVET, as vocational education can be a pathway to social integration. So there are not just economic effects, but also social aspects in accessing TVET and lifelong learning. Therefore, it's ever so important to take the individual needs into account, along with the employers' and society's needs when developing education and finding new solutions, and not to forget the cooperation and solidarity. In his speech illuminating the post-COVID TVET or vocational skills development, Mr. Zeng Yumba from ADEA pointed out that the decision makers and stakeholders are required to rethink new ways for learning in the situation where accessibility, quality, and relevance are the key issues. The challenges caused by the pandemic are hitting hard, especially on TVET, and the innovative solutions that are looked for now should be scalable and systemic. The situation has revealed that standards and investments on ICT are needed, although bearing in mind that not everything can necessarily be solved by digital means in TVET. However, when addressing to the challenges and finding solutions, we need to focus on strengthening the public-private partnerships, and also the importance of international cooperation was raised. The distinguished wide-ranging panelists definitely sparked. They were addressed questions which focused on the implications of digitalization, including issues of accessibility, quality, and relevance, as well as the individual and institutional points of view. When asked on what implications the digital has on infrastructure, for instance, Dr. Firstbaugh stated that infrastructure takes a whole new meaning and the focus would be on the ICT infrastructure. Dr. Rashidi raised that the teachers' quality monitoring is important regarding online education, and teachers need upscaling. When discussing what are possible implications regarding technology, Mr. Kerner described the implications regarding technology as a mixing of different tools and means, and also he raised the implications on teachers and their need to adapt to the situation. Mr. Adongteng indicated that the All African Students Union surveyed the online learning situation and discovered major differences in accessibility regarding online learning. So challenges, especially in vocational training, exists, and those need to be tackled. So how do we ensure that what the learner is learning is relevant, practical, and what about the quality? There, Mr. Kopnov raised the issue of validation, as well as the need to develop new models for workplace learning, and the focus should be on the quality indeed. And Dr. Rashidi pointed out how it is important to reach a quality level that satisfies both educators and employers. New skills and knowledge should be defined. Ms. Miettunen encouraged us that during the lockdown, for instance, in Finland, it was noticed that there really can be new ways found in how to train in vocational education, also keeping the quality on mind. So does the remote learning have implication on institutions? Dr. Firstbaugh agreed that there definitely are implications. And the quality issue was raised again regarding also the student services that need to be redesigned and improved accordingly. Dr. Kopno pointed out the need to renewal of the curricula, and also he pointed out the micro-credentials that are needed for the career development. And online learning is here to stay, as we have stated many times. It also brings positive implications, for instance, making some things more fluent. TVET is considered not just repetitive, but there are constant changes and TVET needs to adapt. For instance, industry requires continuous improvement and collaboration with the TVET institutions. And we should not forget the students' well-being that was also raised at the end. That needs to be taken into account as well. Finally, on behalf of all the organizers, I would like to thank each and every one of you for taking part in this webinar. And thank you for your insights and thoughts and your encouraging attitude. Let's continue to share our experiences and find solutions, and let's do that together. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I'm at a loss of words for that great consolidation and summary. Much appreciated. I must say, working together with all the panelists and with the speakers and with the team at Pinot Network was really great. It was a lot of fun. I do believe that we still have a lot of improvement. I take it upon myself as well, improvement for the next webinars, and I'm looking forward to a continuation. Would be appreciative if all of the attendees would also provide us with their feedback with regard to the polls, so that we can also, as I said, improve ourselves. And having said that, I thank everyone once again for your time in identifying and starting a discussion, which we hope will continue with regard to TVET and the challenges in the current times. I wish you all a lovely evening and thank you. Goodbye, everybody.